After making a show of force in the main hall of Golden Ring Island, Lu Xing was led to the base's conference room, sitting alone at the head of the large table, with people respectfully waiting beside him. It was clear that his plan to cosplay as a divine being had succeeded. He took out his phone, revealing a bright image of his younger sister, Qinghe, on the screen. "I'm waiting for you to come home. You'll definitely be surprised, haha, you're almost done with your tendon and bone training, ready to reach level 4. Lu Xing curled his lips into a smile. "I know you're amazing. Hand the phone to Mom and Dad. I want to talk to them for a bit." Qinghe agreed and passed the screen to their mother. The moment Lu Xing saw his mother's eyes, 2 tears were already forming. "Lu Xing, as long as you're okay, that's all that matters. Come home as soon as you're done," his mother said emotionally. Meanwhile, his father simply smiled at him without saying a word. Ever since the incident, his father had held an unwavering belief that his eldest son was still alive. Lu Xing nodded obediently. "Yes, I'll come back as soon as I can. You two take care as well." It was just a normal call between a son and his parents after being away for a long time. However, to Harold, this scene was so bizarre that he stood there completely dumbfounded. The so-called divine being from Neptune was unbelievable. Harold didn't believe in gods, but the man before him was just as hard to believe. He had parents who were not even 50 years old and a younger sister who hadn't even come of age, so, how old was he? Harold couldn't believe it. A young man who could practically be his great-grandson had, in just a few hours, effortlessly killed 2 level 9 martial saints. He had ruthlessly eliminated the leaders of the world's largest secret international organization, and now, Lu Xing was casually sitting there, calling his family. Harold stared at him for a long time, unable to comprehend how this was possible. If news like this spread, who would believe it? Just a while ago, Harold had laughed at the rumors about Long Nation's new martial saint. But now, 3 martial saints had died at Lu Xing's hands. Just how many level 9 fighters were there in the world? This was terrifying. At this moment, whether or not Lu Xing was a martial saint didn't matter to Harold anymore. What mattered was that he was far too young and unimaginably powerful. Harold stared at him with wide eyes until Lu Xing pointed to the side. "All right, I'm done talking with my family. There's someone here waiting to discuss business with me." Harold forced an awkward smile and waved his hand in greeting. Why did he suddenly point at me? Harold was so stunned that he had to respond. After saying goodbye to his family, Lu Xing put his phone down, smiling as he thanked Harold for his cooperation. Though Lu Xing's words were casual, they carried immense pressure. Harold instinctively bowed deeply in response. "It is my honor, my lord." The dazzling subsequent crystal shimmered in Lu Xing's hand. Lu Xing's smile disappeared, and he turned serious. "All right, let's talk about what we need to discuss. You know what this is, don't you?" Harold had no idea how Lu Xing had gotten his hands on it. He was incredibly shocked. Subsequent crystal. Realizing his reaction was too extreme, Harold mentally berated himself. He was far too old to be this surprised over a piece of subsequent crystal. He immediately bowed and lowered his voice. "My lord, how much do you want?" Lu Xing asked in return. "How much can you provide?" This time, Harold answered cautiously. 1 kilogram. Though his words were careful, he was completely sincere. Upon hearing this, Lu Xing's gaze softened slightly. Initially, he had only been asking out of curiosity, but Harold had misunderstood and thought he was being extorted. The key point was that he actually managed to dig out a source of subsequent crystal. Well, since Harold already assumed that, he might as well go along with it. Lu Xing couldn't help but smile. A few grams alone could vastly accelerate the development of his immortal cells. 1 kilogram. That might even push him to the true limit of level 8 crystal absorption. With plenty left over, why did he feel like he was acting like a villain? Harold was a martial saint, yet look at him. He didn't even dare lift his head, so Lu Xing decided to test him. "It seems you have a lot of subsequent crystal?" Harold immediately opened his mouth to respond. Not much. I've only managed to save a few 100 grams over the past 100 years. But since you killed the leaders of Dark Star and the Black Magic Society, I took over their territories. I should have gathered about a kilogram of subsequent crystal. Lu Xing pretended not to notice Harold's nervousness and simply asked, "Is the production of subsequent crystal really that scarce on this planet?" "No. While it is indeed rare, it's not that rare. It's just that every time subsequent crystal is produced, 9/10 of it must be handed over to the guide. The remaining portion is then divided among all the martial saints in the world." At the mention of that person, Harold's expression darkened. The guide he spoke of was no ordinary martial artist. Even though Lu Xing didn't know who this guide was, he could already tell. This was someone he needed to investigate, a person who could demand that martial saints hand over 90% of their subsequent crystal. This was no simple figure. Lu Xing suddenly recalled his battle with Zhao Ji, the terrifying and strange power that had sent him flying into the deep sea. Could there be a connection? Seeing Lu Xing lost in thought, Harold assumed that he truly didn't know about this. That makes sense. The guide probably hasn't had the chance to come into contact with you yet. Every 10 years, the guide comes to Blue Planet to take stock of the number of level 9 martial saints and collect subsequent crystals. Back then, it wasn't until my 7th year as a martial saint that I learned this secret, and each time the guide arrives, they wear a different face, but that's not the important part. Lu Xing wanted Harold to get to the point, but the latter still felt the need to give a brief introduction about them first. The guides are martial powerhouses from a highly advanced civilization, with strength far surpassing level 9, however, no one knows their exact level or how much stronger they truly are. They have existed since the early years of the martial era, guiding the rise of martial arts. When level 9 martial saints appear on Blue Planet, the guides descend to establish a new world order, coordinate martial artists across nations, and organize the collection of subsequent crystals for submission. The guides never interfere in conflicts between nations, unless the number of deceased level 9 martial saints becomes excessive, in which case they step in to punish those responsible. But does the death of 3 martial saints count as excessive? Lu Xing was referring to the ones he had just killed. There were only a few dozen martial saints in the entire world, yet Harold insisted that such a number wasn't particularly high. The last time the guide took action was during the Dragon Lion War, when more than 10 martial saints were killed or injured. In reality, the guides manage us quite loosely, as they only care about 3 things. First, the production volume of subsequent crystals. If the production of subsequent crystals declines, the guides will become furious. In extreme cases, they might even force us to compensate for the shortfall out of our own pockets. Second, the invasion of mutant beasts. The level of beast invasions must be kept under control. If the situation escalates beyond expectations, the martial saints must step in to suppress it. The third matter was one Harold hesitated to mention. No martial artist above level 9 is allowed to appear on Blue Planet without the guide's permission. This rule, we suspect, is meant to make it easier for them to extract resources. Our planet is classified as a first-to-resource planet with the designation AS-256. This was the key piece of information Lu Xing wanted to hear. The moment he did, he furrowed his brows and pursed his lips. As expected, this was almost identical to what he had deduced from his dreams. No level 10 martial artists, the suppression of native strength. An advanced civilization guiding martial development, leading native civilizations to fight against beast invasions while conveniently extracting rare resources from the planet, and even stifling the emergence of top-tier powerhouses. But what if someone actually reached beyond level 9? Lu Xing boldly asked. Harold had never considered the possibility, and was momentarily stunned. I don't know, I truly don't. Because the path to breaking past level 9 is controlled by the guides. Without a direction, how could anyone break through? Harold didn't seem to be lying, and besides, if there had ever been martial artists surpassing level 9, it would have to be in the future. Lu Xing knew that, at least in this era, no one had reached that level. After some thought, he asked, "When will the guide come next?" "Maybe in a few months, I'm not sure." Every time, representatives of the World Martial Arts Association's martial saints greet them, but one thing is certain. They always arrive after the World Grandmaster Tournament concludes and the subsequent crystals are collected. So the World Grandmaster Tournament was essentially established to gather and distribute subsequent crystals, wasn't it? Exactly, any faction with a martial saint can participate. That's why Dark Star and the Black Magic Society teamed up against our Ring Seal faction. Fewer people dividing the spoils means a larger share for each. Lu Xing glanced at Harold. So, based on what you're saying, quite a few martial saints will show up, right? Harold confirmed without hesitation. Absolutely, pretty much every available martial saint will be there. With such valuable resources at stake, no one would want to miss it. After just a short exchange with Harold, Lu Xing had already found the answers to all of his recent questions. He stood up and smiled at Harold. Very well, when the time comes I'll go with you, hope that's not a problem. Harold was overjoyed. Of course not. It would be an honor for our Ring Seal faction. Inwardly, he was ecstatic. What a stroke of luck! Having such a formidable figure supporting Ring Seal was incredible. This time, their faction's share would be greater than ever before. Lu Xing seemed to understand human nature well. He even said, "You can keep the wealth you've accumulated. I won't take any. Just give me the shares of Dark Star and the Black Magic Society. And one more thing. Take care of Nepson for me. Don't shatter his dreams. I still owe him 2 wishes." Harold immediately agreed. That was a small matter compared to the benefits he was about to reap. Lu Xing had made it clear. He wasn't a saint. If Nepson wanted to believe otherwise, so be it. With his hands in his pockets, Lu Xing walked away. Even though Harold couldn't stop him from leaving, he couldn't help but call out loudly, "Sir, may I ask what is your current strength level?" "My strength?" Lu Xing paused, then replied. "Level 8, he said. 8. Clearly, but somehow, it registered in Harold's ears as 10. Harold let out a relieved sigh. "I knew it, it's level 10. A few seconds later, the number 8 finally sank in. Harold froze, his body trembling. What? Level 8? Even in his 100 years of life, Harold had never been this shaken. A level 8 warrior had just slaughtered level 9 martial saints.